The word yoga is derived from the Sanskrit root yog, meaning to bind, to connect. When translated, it means a union or communion of the soul to God. Practiced for more than 5,000 years, yoga is one of the oldest forms of healing therapy. But now, there is a modern twist on an ancient tradition. While Bikram yoga is based on 26 ancient yoga poses, it is not the slow, quiet, meditative form that springs to mind. This new yoga is done for 90 minutes at a regulated pace in a room that is heated at over 105 degrees. Is Bikram yoga healthy heat therapy, or are practitioners stretching things too far?
It's my church, it's my therapist, and it's my gym all in one. All of those things are part of yoga to me.
I've always suffered from scoliosis, and until I started doing the yoga, I hadn't really seen a great deal of improvement.
What attracted me to Bikram yoga was actually, I was a mild asthmatic, and I was on a steroid and inhalant in the morning and in the evening, and I stopped using that after almost 5 months of doing the yoga.
Got into it for health. I wanted to feel better. I have high blood pressure, arthritis, and I didn't want to be crippled.
More than 16.5 million people practice yoga, and they spend about $2.95 billion on classes and props every year. Bikram yoga is the latest health craze in New York City. It has studios in almost all major areas in New York. This hot yoga, created by Bikram Chowdhury from Calcutta, is a very intense way to get into shape.
Try to touch the wall, look back, lean back, fall back, all the way back.
I had a chance to talk with Otto, who's the owner of Bikram Studio in Union Square and was trained by Bikram himself.
So what would you say is the best thing about Bikram yoga?
Sometimes the feeling you get of elation and, happiness and joy or whatever.
After talking about this exciting new hot yoga, I just had to try it myself. I have tried yoga before, but I knew this was going to be an entirely different experience.
Moving along, arms stretch out to the side, sit with the legs. You have one.
It's a really good series because it's working every system of the body. It's working every muscle, every ligament, every tendon, every fiber of the body, every joint of the body within 90 minutes. Other yoga classes you might go to might have a specific series. They're working on opening up the hips or the hamstrings or working on arm strength or something like this. In 90 minutes, from beginning to end, you're working every system of the body, every muscle, every ligament, and that's the benefit, I think.
Bikram Brooklyn Heights, directed by Troy Myers and Aiko Nakasone. I understand some people are turned off from Bikram because he seems a bit of a money-making guru and a bit over-commercialized.
Well, he's a full human being, and I think people are turned off because the Western mentality is that somebody that's teaching yoga or spirituality has to be dressed in white with a turban on his head, sitting in lotus position at the front of the room. And then they get to Bikram and they see him, and he's very much a showman in his black Speedo and his Rolex watch and headband.
What he's like as a yogi is just extraordinary. The things that he says and the things that he has to contribute, the yoga. It's becoming such a popular thing is because it's making such a difference with people's lives.
Although some of the postures were difficult, I felt as though the heat made me more flexible. I was able to do poses I never thought I'd be able to do. There was a point where I felt dizzy, but I drank water and I felt better. Right after class, I was definitely happy I'd done it. I felt refreshed, rejuvenated, and relaxed. About an hour later, however, I had a loss of energy. I felt completely wiped out. Later on throughout the day, I had ups and downs. It felt good to take the class, but overall I was tired, probably because I didn't drink enough water, and it was the first time I'd done it. As someone who works out 4 to 5 days a week, I even felt fatigued after class. What about someone who doesn't work out at all? Critics of the practice say that pushing the body to these extremes is not as beneficial as one would imagine. To find out more about the medical issues associated with hot yoga, I spoke with Dr. Siegler, a Brooklyn College professor, and a physiologist who's done studies on the effects that heat has on the body during exercise.
This type of activity maybe demands a little bit more on the human body than a normal session of yoga, and I think the education needs to be there as far as the risks that may be increased during this type of activity in this type of environment. When you have such a high temperature and such a high humidity level, you really need to concern yourself a little bit more with the heat exhaustion or possibly heat stroke.
I sat down with Dr. Gotland, the head of sports medicine at Beth Israel Medical Center. Dr. Gotland has treated patients with Bikram-related injuries.
One of the most common injuries we see typically in Bikram is actually one that the premise of Bikram is that it helps prevent. We talk about the heat letting us be more flexible, helping us to improve blood flow, muscle elasticity, and that's true. And Bikram does do that. But the problem is that if we overstretch muscles beyond about 20% of its normal resting length, we actually injure those muscle fibers. We actually overstretch them. And by overstretching muscles, you can get a partial tear. So while on one hand, it's great that the Bikram allows us to get more flexible, we better avoid becoming over-flexible and not stretching too much.
Now that I have some idea about what hot yoga is, I wanted to hear what non-Bikram instructors Ginger Lagone and Alexis Vidor had to say about this yoga.
The fact that they heat the room up so much, and your body might not be in the correct position for your shape to get into a pose, but it's so hot and you're so warmed up that you're not going to, you're more flexible than you normally are, so you can ease right into it. But what's going on structurally that might show up later that you might not notice?
One night I ran into a family friend who's a chiropractor, and I was telling him that I'd been practicing Bikram at this center nearby, and he said, "Oh, that's that hot center, that's that hot yoga studio." And I said, "Yeah." He goes, "That is the best place for my business, because so many people go there and injure themselves and come to me with spine problems and back aches and are, slipped a disc and all kinds of things." Really? He's like, I don't know what he's doing to them, but there's problems.
People are just doing what works, and that's what I'm doing. I'm doing what works for me and for my body. I don't care what any critic has to say and anybody has to say about the yoga. I know what the yoga does for me.
It teaches you how to move through life more conscientiously. It brings you back to your breath, and it's so challenging and so difficult that every time I come to class and make it, it feels great, and I feel like if I can get through that class in the heat and move through it with grace, that I can pretty much take on anything.
Despite the mixed opinions, there is no doubt that hot yoga will continue to make New York City and the rest of America sweat.